Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Abhilash and I am from the AD Solutions team here at Manage Engine, and I would be your presenter for today. Now, before we get started, I'd like to thank you all for joining in. Thank you so much for taking out the time. For those of you who know me already, thank you so much for joining in again. It's so nice to see you all. And for those of you who are new here today, welcome aboard. Now, before we get started, I would like to run a quick audio video check because I want to make sure that everybody out here today is able to hear and see the screen well. So let's just start off with a quick audio check. If you can hear my voice, if my voice is well and clear without any distortion in the audio, please punch in yes via the chat box. Just say yes, just say okay via the chat box if my voice is well and clear. All right, thank you so much. Now, if you can see the screen, if you can see the title, my name, and my email, please punch in yes via the chat box. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, before we get started, a few housekeeping steps that I will need to run through. Number one is that all the source links are embedded within the slides themselves. And number two is that the slide deck would be emailed to you post the webinar. So if you've got any questions, please keep them coming via the chat box, or you could always reach out to me on my email at abi@manageengine.com. That's abi@manageengine.com, and I would be more than happy to help you out. So today's webinar is about how unmonitored permissions and unchecked privileged access and how that could lead to a security breach. Now, the reason I chose to speak about this topic today is because Active Directory is tied with permissions. Right? Every user needs permissions to perform any kind of activity. Even your standard domain users, for that matter, need read permissions to read object information. Now, in times such as this, if an end user can get away with the permission that the admin or the help desk is unaware of, that could lead to a security breach. And God forbid, if that permission happens to be privileged, that could lead to widespread fallout of the organization. So the focus of today's webinar will be on your privileged users, because your privileged users, they are the kings and queens of your organization. So that brings me to today's agenda. I will be talking about the attack stats of 2019. Now, the reason I'm doing this is just so you get an idea of today's modern cyber attack landscape. And then I would be talking about the modern cyber attack cycle and what role do your privileged users play in the cyber attack cycle. Now, the reason I'm doing this is to prove my earlier point where I mentioned that your privileged users, they are the kings and queens of your organization. They hold the keys to your kingdom. And then I would be sharing with you a few roadblocks and a few challenges that administrators and help desk technicians face when it comes to securing privileged user access. And in the third part of today's webinar, I would be showing you a simulation of a live privilege escalation attack. Now, the reason I'm doing this is to prove my earlier point where I said that if an end user can get away with the permission that the admin or the help desk is unaware of, that could lead to a security breach, that could lead to an organization's downfall. And then we will try and solve this issue by employing a step-by-step approach where we will first try to identify and discover privileged access, and then we will take a look at a few tips and techniques to manage and to govern privileged access effectively. And finally, we will see how AD Manager Plus can be leveraged to overcome all of these issues. So this is the attack stats of 2019, and please note that privilege is everywhere. The Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report 2019 states that your C-suite executives, who are your privileged users, they are 12 times more likely to be targeted in attacks. The Forrester report states that 80% breaches involve access to a privileged account. And it takes 99 days on an average for an organization to find out that it has been breached in the first place, and just 3 days after initial access, an attacker can obtain domain-level credentials. A survey conducted by Centrify in 2019 found that 74% breaches that were acknowledged involved access to a privileged user account. Now please note that privilege is everywhere. The first thing an attacker will try and do is to break a user account with privileges, because that would give the attacker instant access to the deepest parts of your organization's network. And this is the cyber attack cycle that I was talking about. And please note that your privileged users, they are bang on at the center. Now the attack can be from the inside, the attack can be from the external network perimeter. No matter where the attack is from, the first thing an attacker will try and do is to escalate privileges. And what does an attacker do after he or she finds or compromises a privileged user account? The attacker will exploit the access that that victim user has. And once that's done, the attacker will attempt to move higher up in the network hierarchy. So an attacker basically starts off at an end user system, slowly moves into servers, business servers that host critical company data, and then moves in to your domain controllers. And once an attacker gets hold of a domain controller, that's the end of things, because domain controllers, they are the hearts of your organization. And what does an attacker do after he or she finds the required information? The attacker will disrupt business, or the attacker will exfiltrate the data. The attacker will take organization sensitive data and simply put it on the dark web for money, for ransom. Now I keep saying attackers, hackers, and intruders, but the truth is most attacks happen through your insiders. And according to me, there are three kinds of insiders. Number one is your malicious insider. Now this is an insider gone bad. This is an insider gone rogue. This is a user or an employee who wants to watch your organization bleed. The second is your unintentional insider. Now this is an insider who cannot differentiate between good and bad. What happens if I download this attachment? What happens if I enable this option? And the third kind is your exploited insider. Now this is an insider who is absolutely careless about security. A good example for this can be the Marriott attack, where an administrator user's credentials were compromised by an attacker, thereby leading out to leakage of customer sensitive information. Now, a few challenges that administrators and help desk face when it comes to securing privileged user access. The first challenge is password management. Now, passwords, like I always say, are the first line of defense for your organization, but the passwords used, they are weak. Active Directory was introduced in the year 2000. This is 2019. And why are weak passwords still a problem? The Verizon Data Breach Investigations report states that 81% attacks are due to stolen or weak user credentials. A good reason for this can be the Active Directory's password policy. Now, when we have such a legacy policy in place, when we have a password policy that is more than a decade old, we are bound to get breached. Passwords used are not under constant change cycle, and passwords are reused again. A good example for this can be the ADUC password reset, where an admin can reuse the resetted passwords how many ever times he or she wants. And especially with the hybrid environment in the picture, the number of user logons have increased. The number of passwords have increased, and the number of opportunities an attacker has also increased. The second point is access management. Now, granted that Active Directory can give widespread access in a hybrid environment, but the truth is access is not centrally managed. Access cannot be given from a central location, access cannot be revoked from a central location, and access cannot be viewed from a central location. Access once granted is not ungranted. Monitoring and tracking is the third problem, where privileged access to objects, and not just Active Directory objects, but also files and folders, are not monitored. Privileged activity performed by your privileged and your sensitive users are not tracked. And the fourth point is scalability. Organizations are growing, the number of users are increasing, and the number of resources are increasing. And the complex structure of growing organizations is making it very difficult for administrators and help desk technicians to manage privileged access. Now, time for the live privilege escalation attack that I was talking about. Now, these attacks are deeply tied to the conversation I've been making so far. Because if an end user can get away with the privilege that the admin or the help desk is unaware of, that could lead to a security breach, and that is exactly what we are going to see in these attacks. So the first attack will be using an internal user's account. So we will log in as a regular domain joined user, and we will leverage Microsoft's built-in utility tool PowerShell to get an administrator's password hash. And then we will take the hash online and we will crack it to get the plain text password. So let's go ahead and perform the first attack, right? So this is my VM right here, and let me show you how this is done. So before I get started, let me quickly open up PowerShell and show you that I am logged in as a user called James, and these are James's privileges. James is just a member of these groups, and Active Directory tells me that James is not a privileged user or an administrator of any kind. Alright, so in order to perform the attack, we would be using a tool called Mimikatz. Now this is a tool freely available online. All you have to do is simply download the zip file and extract it, and this is what you get. And once it's done, simply head into the folder and navigate to either a 64-bit or a 32-bit folder based on the processing bit of your system. In this case, mine is a 64-bit system, so I will head into that. And now let me simply copy the path and head into PowerShell again, and let me shift to the path that I just copied. Right, so once I've changed my directories, the next step is to launch Mimikatz. So in order to launch Mimikatz, all I have to do is run a command called /mimikatz.exe, and once I press enter, we can see that Mimikatz has started. Now let me run a command called LSA dump, that's the local security authority dump, and DC sync. Please note this command DC sync because I will talk about it in a few minutes from now. And let me give in a user's name, a user who is the administrator. And let me go ahead and give in the domain name, that is exchange.com. And once I click enter, you can see that it took us a grand total of 4 to 5 seconds, and here we have the administrator's password hash. This is the NTLM hash. Now let me quickly copy the hash, minimize this, open up Notepad, and you can see that I already have the hash pasted here. So let me copy this and head into Google Chrome, and let me go ahead and open up a site called crackstation.net. Now there are plenty of password hacking sites available. Now what these sites do is they basically take the NTLM hash and they run it against the databases and give you the equivalent plain text or the clear text password. All right, so once I paste the hash right here and check this box, and once I give in crack hashes, we have the administrator's plain text password right in front of us. So this is the hash that we got from PowerShell and Mimikatz, and this is the plain text password of the administrator. Now the rest of the story is pretty straightforward, right? But this is not a normal activity because it's not normal for an end user to simply query for an administrator's password hash. There is a privilege that was given to the user using which James was able to obtain the admin's password hash. What do you think caused this attack to happen? Punch in your answers via the chat box and let's see if you have this covered in your organization. And let's go ahead and proceed to the next attack, where we will be using an internal user's credentials. And again, we will leverage Microsoft's built-in utility tool PowerShell to add a backdoor user to the administrators group. So what we will do is we will implant an MSI application or a Windows installer application using which we will create and add a backdoor user to the administrators group in Active Directory. Alright, so let me quickly head into my VM here and close the PowerShell session. And in order to perform this attack, I would be using a module called PowerUp. Now this module again is freely available online. All you have to do is simply download it, save it as a PowerShell module, and let me show you how this is done. Alright, so this is the user, James's PowerShell console, and let me run a command called PowerShell.exe exec and then bypass. Now the reason I'm running this command is because Microsoft by default does not let you run scripts that are not digitally signed or that are not from authorized sources. So running this command will basically enable an end user to run any malicious script. Alright, so once that's done, let me shift to the desktop because that is where my PowerUp module is, and let me go ahead and import the module into PowerShell. So that's import module ./powerup.ps1, and once that's done, all I have to do is run a command called invoke all checks. So what's going to happen here is invoke all checks is going to check for James's privileges in Active Directory. Now the net user James command told me that James wasn't a privileged user, but this script performs a deeper check for signs of privilege that can be exploited. Alright, so once that's done, let me run a command called write user add MSI. That's the Windows installer application, and once I click enter, you can see that the application is pushed out on the desktop. This was not there when we started. Right, so let me quickly double click the application and give yes. You can see that I am presented with the UI in front of me to create a user and add the user to the group that I wish, in this case the administrators group. So let me call the user backdoor_hacker and let me give in a password, and once I click create, let me show you what just happened. Alright, so that's net local group administrators. Check this out. Here we have the backdoor_hacker user. Alright, so using James's privileges, we simply logged on and we installed an application using which we added a backdoor user to the administrators group, and that concludes the second attack. So the common pattern followed in both the attacks. What happened here was a reconnaissance was done on the domain, right? So domain was surveyed by an attacker, reconnaissance was done, and a user was found with a hidden privilege, and that privilege was exploited to gain access to an admin account, which is what happened in both cases. In the first case, we got the administrator's password hash, and in the second case, we were able to create and add a backdoor user to the administrators group. Now this is deeply tied to the conversation I've been making so far. A small mistake caused 2 security breaches to happen. All right, so let me go ahead and tell you what actually caused the attacks. So if I head into my VM right here, and if I open up the ADUC tool, quickly opening up the ADUC tool, and this is the domain DNS node, right? So let me right click on it and hit properties and head into security, and once I scroll down, we have a user called James right here, and James has read privileges, which is normal because every user, every authenticated user has read privileges over the domain, right? So let me scroll down, and you can see that James has these permissions assigned to him: replicating directory changes and replicating directory changes all. What are these permissions? Now let me tell you that these permissions are used by domain controllers to update or replicate the changes between themselves. And not just domain controllers, but also applications such as Forefront Identity Manager or SharePoint. Right? So what these applications do is they'll use an account with replicating directory changes permissions to keep their databases up to date to that of Active Directory's database. So generally an administrator or a specific user account configured for performing replicating activities is assigned these permissions, but in this case, James has the replicating directory changes permission. And this is what James used to get the administrator's password hash. So that is what caused the first attack. So let me quickly head into AD Manager here and log in. And once I head into reports right here, let me actually show you what caused the attack, because it's not normal for an end user to simply have replicating permissions over a domain, right? So if I head into user reports and head into groups for users, you can see that I have James selected here, and these are James's memberships. Now, if you do not remember, let me quickly run the command again for you. This is net user James, and these are James's group memberships according to Active Directory. All right, and let's see what AD Manager tells us. So if I scroll down, you can see that James is a member of Support Mail, which we knew already, but Support Mail is a member of Exchange Windows permissions. And that is how James was able to give himself the replicating directory changes permissions, because the Exchange Windows permissions group has write access over the domain object. Now, James was never a direct member of the Exchange Windows permissions group, but via nested memberships, because James was a member of the Support Mail group and Support Mail was in turn a member of the Exchange Windows permissions group. Via nested memberships, James was able to get write access over the domain object, using which James gave himself replicating directory changes permissions. So that is what caused the first attack. And how do we check this? We check the security node of the object in Active Directory. All right, we go ahead into the ADUC tool and we check the security tab here of the domain object. But this is a very cumbersome process, because on a domain object, there may be thousands of permissions. Right? This is a test environment and I have about 20 to 30 permissions right here. But in a full-blown enterprise environment, there may be multiple permissions. So how do we go about checking this? So if I head into AD Manager and Reports and Security Reports and AD Objects Accessible by Accounts, here we have James selected right here. Let me go ahead and search for the domain DNS node, because that is where the replicating directory changes permissions were assigned. And once I click permissions and scroll down, we can see that James has replicating directory changes permissions, and not just James, but even Luna has replicating directory changes permissions. All right, and all we have to do here is simply select the accounts that we want, hit generate, and we can view the permissions that all of these accounts have over the domain. So that is what caused the first attack, and we can track that using the groups for users report and the AD Objects Accessible by Accounts report under Security Reports in AD Manager Plus. So what caused the second attack? Let me head into groups for users again, and if I scroll down, we have a Marketing Sydney group, which we knew already, right? James was a member of the Marketing Sydney group, but Marketing Sydney is a member of Australia. Australia, member of managers, and managers is a member of domain admins. Now the idea must be pretty clear. Via nested memberships again, James acquired the domain administrator's privilege, using which James was able to install an MSI application, which helped him to create and add a backdoor user to the administrator's group. So that is what caused the second attack, and that is how it can be tracked with AD Manager Plus. So how do we go about fixing these problems? The fix is not one, but actually two. The first fix is to identify and to discover privileged access. All right, so a few tips that we could employ to identify and discover privileged access effectively. The first thing I would like for you to do is monitor all of these accounts. Your delegated, your domain admins, your emergency accounts. These are accounts that are given emergency admin privileges in case of situations such as server failure. Your service accounts, your application accounts, and your local admin accounts. Monitor all of these accounts. Ensure only your trusted users wield these accounts, and ensure that the number of users using these accounts are less in number, because then it becomes easier to track them. And here are a few tips that we could employ. The first thing I would like for you to do is monitor your built-in privilege groups. All right, your privilege groups such as your domain admins, your schema admins, monitor all of these groups. Ensure only trusted users are members of these groups, and ensure you check for nested memberships as well. And not just your built-in groups, but monitor all your security groups across your domains and across your platforms. For example, the Exchange Windows Permissions group, and do not forget to check for nested memberships. And this is how it can be done with AD Manager. So head into the reports and user reports, and we have groups for users that we saw earlier, and users and groups as well. Now this is a group-based search for memberships. All you have to do is simply select the groups that you want, and once you click generate, the membership would be right in front of you, and you could take action directly from the place where you have generated the report. All right, so in this case, let's say I want to remove the backdoor user. All I have to do is simply check the backdoor user and click delete, disable, remove from group, or any cleanup activity that I would want to perform. And this button right here, this checkbox, can help you toggle between indirect and direct group memberships. So these are two reports that you can leverage to check your users' group memberships, including your nested memberships in Active Directory. And we also have something called group reports. Now these reports are catered towards group memberships. All right, for example, if I head into detailed group members, I can select a group right here and I can check the membership based on certain parameters. For instance, I only want to see these users, and I can further filter it based on certain attributes as well. All right, so that is my first point. Monitor your privileged groups using your user reports, your nested reports under user reports, and your group reports. My second point is monitor your OU and your object permissions. Now, monitoring OU and your object permissions is absolutely critical. And the only way you can do this in Active Directory is by, let me show you, by clicking on the OU and clicking Properties and selecting the Security tab. But this is a very manual and a very cumbersome process. So Active Directory gives you another option right here. All right, so let me quickly head onto the domain node, right click, Properties, and Security, and Advanced, and Effective Access. All right, so I can select a user right here. Let me go ahead and select a user called Luna. All right, and once I click View Effective Access, this would push out Luna's permissions over the domain, but this information is very limited. Let me tell you why. Number one, there is no OU details, right? We do not know the name of the OU over which Luna has permissions. And the second point is these permissions do not query nested permissions. For instance, if an OU is nested inside an OU, it only gives out the parent OU permissions. So finding individual object permissions in Active Directory is one of the hardest things that administrators have to face. But this can be easily done with AD Manager if I head into Reports, Security Reports, and let's say Search Permissions. Right, so here I have an OU right here, and here I have a security principal where I can select any user that I want. And once I select a user, specify the permission and hit generate, the user's permission would be pushed out instantly. All right, so that would be my second point. Monitor your OU and your object permissions. And my third point would be to not forget your data storage. Your data, which is your files and folders, are your organization's gold, are your organization's currency. So do not forget your file and folder permissions, especially the privileged permissions over your files and folders. And again, the only way to do this in Active Directory is to manually right-click a folder, check the security tab across every file server in your organization. But this is very cumbersome. All right, and this can easily be done if I head into reports with an AD Manager and head into NTFS reports. All right, now let's say folders accessible by accounts. All right, so let me quickly head into reports. Okay, let me log in again. All right, perfect. Reports and NTFS reports and folders accessible by accounts. So here I can select an account, specify a path, and I can also check subfolder permissions, and I can also specify an access type. In this case, let's say any control. And once I click generate, the permissions of Luna over the path specified here are pushed out, including the subfolder permissions as well. As you can see, company confidential is the parent folder, and 1, 2, 3 are the subfolders, and you can view the detailed permissions as well. So that is your NTFS reports. You can monitor permissions across your files and folders, across file servers in your organization using NTFS reports. And security reports here is to monitor permissions over your Active Directory objects. My fourth point would be to keep an eye out for your stale privileged user accounts. Now, stale accounts are accounts that are enabled but haven't logged on in a very long time. Now, this is something attackers would love. Because if an attacker can get a hold of a stale account, the attacker can potentially log in and remain invisible to the administrator, because this would look like a normal activity in Active Directory. So in order to find out what your stale user accounts are, all you have to do is simply head into reports right here, head into user reports, and you have something called inactive users. So simply specify the time right here, or you could specify the domain. And if you have multiple domains, you could check those as well. And once you click generate, all the inactive users in the domain for the last 30 days would be right in front of you. Now let me go ahead and search if I have an admin user. So here we are. I have a server admin who is inactive from the last 2 months, and I also have an emergency admin who is inactive from the last month. Once we have the information in front of us, all we have to do is simply select and carry out the cleanout actions directly from the place where we got the information. Alright, so that would be my fourth point. Keep an eye out for your stale user accounts and subject them to cleanup, and keep an eye out especially for your stale privileged user accounts, because that would give instant privileged access for your attacker. Alright, now the fifth point is monitor for admin privilege via GPO. And these are a few settings that you could monitor. A good example here would be backup files and directories. Now, backup files and directories, a GPO setting when assigned to a user. Now the user can essentially override the settings specified by an admin, override any registry settings, and backup folders and files and directories in Active Directory. Alright, but my question to you is pretty simple. How do you know if a user is using this privilege, this GPO setting that gave him or her the privilege to actually back up data or to steal data? So that would be my fifth point, monitor your admin privilege via GPO. My sixth point would be monitor your admin privilege also on your virtual infrastructures. For example, your Hyper-V administrators group. Check the group for memberships and ensure only your trusted users are members of the Hyper-V administrators group, because if an attacker can gain access to a Hyper-V admin group, then the attacker can eventually flow into your local systems and to your domain controllers. And my last point here is be on the lookout for your domain service account abuse. Your service accounts are also equally privileged and important. For example, your Exchange or your backup or your SQL service accounts. Ensure that you have strong passwords across these service accounts, or an even better option would be to use managed service accounts, because the passwords for managed service accounts would be reset automatically every 30 days. So these are a few tips to identify and to discover privileged access. Your groups, your AD object permissions, your files and folders, your inactive user accounts, your admin privilege via GPO, your admin privilege on your virtual infrastructure, and your domain service accounts. Now that we know which of our users are privileged and that we have identified our privileged users, the next step is to manage or to restructure or to govern privileged access effectively. And here are a few tips that we could employ. The first thing I would like for you to do is protect your user logons. Like I always say, logons are the first line of defense. So protect your user logons. And by this I mean use strong user passwords for all user logons and adopt multi-factor authentication. Now, when you adopt multi-factor authentication, a user's identity can be double checked. All right. So when you double check a user's legitimacy, security is increased. So use strong passwords for all of your user accounts and adopt MFA. And if you cannot set up MFA for all of your user accounts, ensure that you have MFA or multi-factor authentication set up for your privileged accounts at the least. So that would be my first point, protect your logons. My second point would be to separate privileges for specific tasks. Now, when you separate privileges for specific tasks, it becomes easier to track and to keep a checklist. The only way to do this in Active Directory is by using RSAT tools, where RSAT or remote server administration tools have to be installed on a client system, and the user has to be given privileges by the administrator to perform delegated activities. And the problem here is the end user's permissions, native permissions, are modified in order for him or her to carry out admin related tasks. But in AD Manager, all a technician or a delegated user has to do is simply head into AD Manager just by accessing the URL from the browser, head into delegation. All right, so let me show you how we can actually give out delegation in AD Manager. So let me go ahead and click on help desk roles and let me create a new role. All right, and let me call the role, let's say a role for the HR manager. So I will give in HR manager right here, and let me go ahead and give the HR manager the ability to create users and to reset user passwords, and let's say to move user accounts. All right, and once I click save, we can see that the role is now saved, and all we have to do is simply head into help desk technicians. Now your technicians are Active Directory users configured in AD Manager to perform admin related activities. All right, so once I edit my technician, all I have to do now is simply select the role from the drop down, in this case the HR manager role, and once I click save changes, we can see that the technician is updated. Now all the role creation and the role assigning that we did just now only happens in AD Manager. We are not touching the user's native permission. So this is completely non-invasive delegation. All right, so how does this work? Let me quickly sign out and sign in as Brad and show you how this exactly works. All right, so keying in Brad's password, and once I select the domain and log in, let me head into the management tab, right? And these are the activities delegated to Brad by the admin. And I repeat, this is completely non-invasive. Brad's native permissions are completely untouched, right? So let's say Brad wants to reset a password. Here, all we have to do is simply select, let's say, a random password. That's right, AD Manager Plus has a built-in random password generator. Now this defeats one problem that I posed earlier, where admins can reuse passwords during reset, but by using a random password generator, this security threat is now eliminated. All right, so let's say user must change passwords at next logon. Now all we have to do is simply search for a user, or simply hit search and checkbox the users that we want to reset the password for, and let's see how this pans out. So this is Luna right here, and all Brad has to do is select the user and click apply, and Luna's password would be reset instantly. All right, and Luna would be notified via SMS about the resetted password. So that would be my second point, separate privileges for specific tasks. My third point would be to implement least privileged access, or use the principle of least privileged access. Now, I cannot stress on this point enough. We need to give our users just the access that they need. Nothing more, nothing less. And the good place to start this would be your files and folders and your groups, because they either make or break your Active Directory. All right, so let me head into AD Manager Plus here, sign out as Brad, and let me go ahead and sign in as the admin again. And let me show you how this is done with an AD Manager. So all I have to do is head into reports right here, and you can see, like I said earlier, that we can find out group memberships using the nested reports and group reports right here. Right, and we can also find file and folder permissions using the NTFS reports right here. Now, if I head into the management tab, now let me tell you that this tab is good enough for you to restructure your file and folder permissions and your group permissions in Active Directory. So let me go ahead and click on group attributes. Over here, you can select the group that you want to add your users to, similarly remove, and all you have to do is simply hit search or type in the names, select the users that you want, and all the group memberships would be restructured for the respective users. All right, so let me now head into file server management within the AD management tab. Now this is one single pane of glass for you to manage permissions across your file servers in your organization. Reports can help you query for information, and management tab can help you manage across your file servers in your organization. So you can simply add your file servers right here, and let me show you what I mean. If I head into modify NTFS permissions, all you have to do now is simply select the folders that you want, specify the accounts that you want, and once you click modify, the permissions would be changed. And we also have special checkboxes here. For instance, this checkbox right here would remove the existing permissions and apply the permissions that we have specified right here. And if you already have a folder with least privilege access implemented, all you have to do is simply copy the permissions from the folder and let it apply to the selected folders right here. So that is restructuring your groups and your files and folders, right? And implementing least privileged access. My fourth point is approval workflow. Now, using approval workflow, we can set up a multi-step check or multiple checkpoints whenever critical activities are performed. And also, we can set up time-bound access for critical operations. For instance, adding users to groups or changing file and folder permissions, and this is how it can be done within AD Manager. So let me head into the workflow tab right here, and if I head into business workflow, you can see the workflow stages right here. All right, so a requester, who is basically an AD user configured as a requester, requests for an operation, and it goes through multiple people, and only when the executor approves will the activity actually be performed. Now I said time-bound access, right? And if you can recollect, I mentioned a point earlier where I said that access once granted is not always ungranted. And using the request tab, let me head into add to group. Over here, a requester can basically request adding another user to a group, and this can be based on a specific set of time period, in this case 30 minutes. So within 30 minutes, the user's group membership would automatically be revoked, and the same logic applies to your folder permissions as well. All right, so that would be my fourth point, approval workflow, where you can set up a multiple step check for all critical operations, and you can also set up time-bound access. My fifth point would be to record your privileged activities, keep a track of all the activities performed by your privileged users. And isolate privileged access. Now, when you have privileged users, ensure that they perform privileged activities only through specific workstations. All right, and ensure that they do not use any other workstation to carry out privilege or admin related activities, and ensure that these workstations are behind strong security measures. Use two separate accounts for your admins and your privileged users. One account to carry out admin or privileged activities, and another account to carry out routine domain activities. And my last point is cleanup of accounts and privileged user onboarding, and you can automate all of these processes. Here is a good example. So we can find the inactive users using the reporting tab, and these inactive users can be subject to a cleanup, not just across AD, but across the hybrid environment as well, such as Office 365 and Exchange. And this entire process can be automated, and the admin can be kept in the loop at all times. Similarly, user onboarding. Whenever admin users are created, ensure that the process is automated, where admins are only given specific permissions that was set up in the automation, so there is no scope for mistakes. All right, so these are a few tips that we could employ to manage or to restructure privileged access effectively. So a quick summary of what we saw today. We saw how a user with a hidden privilege could be exploited to perform a full-blown attack on Active Directory. And in order to overcome such escalation attacks, we employed a two-step process. One, where we tried and identified all privileged access in our organization, and second, we tried to discover or uncover any hidden privileges. And in the second step, we restructured privileged access in a secure manner to safeguard our organization from such privilege escalation attacks. Now, before we end today's webinar, I would like to run a quick poll. Now, this is for our internal team. Now, you will see two questions flash across your screen. Just punch in the answers, and once that's done, we can end the session. All right, so I will be pushing out the first poll right now. So you will be seeing a question flashing across your screen, and please punch in the answer. So here we go. This would be the first poll. The poll would be open for about 10 to 15 seconds, so you can punch in your answers comfortably.